So then welcome to today's Technical Steering Committee. We will talk about the Gardener Landscape Kit. We want to take the usual process for the steering meeting. That means we start with 25 minutes of asking clarifying questions. Then we continue with 25 more minutes of feedback and general discussions before we go into a decision in the last 10 minutes. As we have already had a good review and good back and forth and discussion in the pull request, I'm not sure if there are any open questions, but let's open it up to everybody. Anything you still want to discuss?
I would be interested about this three-way merge that was described, and what happens when there's a conflict. So, for example, you could probably override something, and then with a new GLK version, this doesn't work anymore properly, right? So how would the user become aware of it? Would this then simply fail, or?
So, as you're aware, we already developed a POC, and the way it is currently developed is that once you override something, then this will always take precedence. So the example is you deliver the landscape kit with version 1, and then you have a field in a manifest that has some value. The operator decides to change that value. Then the default value in the landscape kit changes in version 2. It is delivered. The landscape is generated again. And then this new default value is not overwriting the stuff that was once changed by the operator. So this is the way it is implemented in the POC at the moment. However, Tim already also had a comment about this, if it makes sense to make this configurable, right? So that we do not blindly assume to always take the overwritten value, but we somehow notify the operators there is a merge conflict and they have the option to resolve the conflicts manually. If that makes sense. And we have both covered, and people can decide whatever fits more for them.
Yes. I think there might probably be scenarios where we change some default at some point in time, and then if that's just silently ignored and the user wouldn't see it at all, maybe, this can result in follow-up issues. So it would be good if this would be somehow visible.
Okay, so one option would be if you make it configurable, then we could add a comment behind this custom value or the adopted value, and this comment can say something like attention, new default value, or something like this, or merge conflict. This is the new default value. Please resolve this conflict. Something like this.
Yeah, sounds good.
Another open point from the PR review was how you would use dev versions or dev builds for deploying with the landscape kit. For example, when you validate a new Gardener release, you don't want to take a release first before deploying it on a development landscape, right? Can you maybe quickly outline how this process would look like and how it plays all together with the landscape kit?
So when it comes to a new component version like Gardener or any extension, then the question is, what is part of that new version. So the simple case is, and I think this is the 95% case for extensions, you have a new release. The release is more or less just a version bump. So there is no API change or something that needs to be in Landscape Kit itself. Then you could use the very same Landscape Kit version and just bump the extension version that is inside. So we have the version vector in Landscape Kit. And then it is as simple as really adjusting the version in this version vector. However, if you think about Gardener, where we might, so this is only an example, of course, could be also any extension. But if there is any API change involved, let's say we deprecated a node field and there's a replacement field and you want to deliver some migration logic with this Gardener update, then I suppose the release validation will happen very similar to how Gardener and extensions are released today. So you need to have a dev version of, or a pre-released version of the Landscape Kit, where you use a released version of Gardener or extensions and put the migration stuff inside, test that on the qualifying landscape. And once you did that, you can release the Landscape Kit eventually.
But even if adaptations in the Landscape Kit are required, I would expect that these breaking changes happen over a few releases. So
Yes.
let's consider deprecation in one release, and maybe 3 releases later, the field is removed in favor of the replacement. Then we would have enough time to adapt the Landscape Kit as all the other deployment mechanisms. So we don't need to adapt it right away when validating the new version that deprecates the field, right? So these cases should still be able to use the fast lane with just overriding the image version in the vector, right?
I think as long as you are not too far behind, right? I mean, it
Yes.
would work if you're basically always one version behind. And as you said, we go step by step and don't make completely breaking changes, then it should work with just bumping the version, yes.
Okay, cool.
I think also the general assumption is that you do this step by step in terms of you first release the component itself, like Gardener or extensions, and then you take care about changing the stuff in or the procedure in landscapes in the Landscape Kit, and then release the Landscape Kit. But you would probably not go ahead and say, I want to test a dev version of Gardener together with a dev version of Landscape Kit and release it all together. Because this might work if you only test one pre-released version of Gardener, but if this happens in combination with extensions, then there might be extensions waiting for releases of other extensions of Gardener itself, and this can turn out pretty messy, I guess. I think that this is why I said I think the general guideline is first release the extension or Gardener, then go ahead with the Landscape Kit and check the changes there that are required to bring out this version.
But isn't this sometimes a scenario where you have a new dev Gardener version and you need to, I don't know, provide some new configuration? And we would want to generate this via the Landscape Kit. So we would have also there some changes. And maybe and you say we have to first release Gardener and make sure this works independently anyway.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah. That's the assumption. Or this is there's no mechanism behind it that would forbid doing it either way. But to safeguard the release process, I would say it's better to do it step by step. So first release it release the Gardener version independently of Landscape Kit and then do it for the Landscape Kit.
Even if you want to test some new fields, you can still put it in the landscape repository, right?
Yes.
So testing new features is still possible even without changing the landscape kit. You might, however, introduce a change in the landscape kit later on to make use of this new feature by default, but it doesn't prevent you from enabling it on the landscape first for validation purposes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Unless you also have some more complicated migration that you maybe want to roll out with the same version, and then you might want to, test it together. But I don't know, maybe that's all too abstract at this point.
I mean, there was this discussion in the pull request review. Not sure, I think it was also from Tim, where he said, I'm torn between where this migration logic belongs to. Because if you see it like this, you could also argue a migration logic always belongs to a component, and why shouldn't a component deliver the migration logic that is relevant to the version it releases, right? But this has also some other side effects. So it would be a more decentralized procedure, and then the landscape kit would need to pick up these changes from those repositories somehow. So we need to have a standard how components can release their migration logic with a release, and it needs to include it then. So this would be right. So at the moment, it is described in a way that the migration logic is always inside of the landscape kit, so centralized there. But the decentralized approach would be an alternative, which, as I said, has also implications when it comes to how do we deal with that? You need to spin up some standards and stuff like this.
Probably it depends on what needs to be migrated. I mean, if it's resources that were generated by the landscape kit, then of course it belongs there. The other things can be in the component directly. Okay. And how often do you plan to release the landscape kit? Whenever there's a new component version in it?
That's a good question. Our current assumption is that we don't want to release on every component release, but we only want to release when it's required to have a release. So an example is extension versions will be released. There's no change, no migration necessary whatsoever. Then you can use the very same landscape kit version for that new extension version as well. But once you need a migration, or you want to have a migration in the landscape kit, you also need to release the landscape kit. So this makes us, or this requires us to do this release only when we really need to have one. Otherwise, we will probably end up in many releases, right? So if we have like 10 extensions plus Gardener plus some other stuff, I don't know, then there will be releases all over the place for the landscape kit.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, as a user, how you would know what is now a good version of the landscape kit that I can use with my component vector.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we just a few minutes ago said basically we should not fall too far behind. So if you're kind of on the, maybe not the latest, but next to latest version, then you can easily deploy dev versions because we roll things out slowly one after another. Now, if we don't release the landscape kit basically with each release, it's hard for me to tell, is a new version now working with the landscape kit or am I requiring a new one? So we basically we would then see maybe in the release notes, okay, now we can go with Gardner release 139. And then the next, some later release note would say 150. And in between, it's kind of the same thing, right?
That's a good point. So we also thought about this case, and our current approach of dealing with it is we have this version vector maintained on a release branch, and we can update this version vector. So at the moment in GitHub, and the landscape kit is, so this is a configuration, it is able to download this version vector. So it downloads the version vector of its own release from this release branch and uses those updated component versions that are in this vector. So the release is static, but the upstream version vector is statically constantly updated.
After the output qualification, or?
Well, there is no output qualification.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but or I think I get it, or I missed it. You want that actually, right? So you want this. This is the question of Raphael, right? So you want to know what is a good combination of the different component versions.
Yes.
So you want this thing, and you don't get it. I mean, we do, of course, when we do our output qualification, we know which versions belong together and which were output qualified, and you trust that more than just trying to keep up with the latest versions. What you want is kind of from us the information. Yeah, we tried this combination because there are so many different combinations, and this one was working. So this is the recommended version vector.
You're absolutely right, and I totally agree. The issue is more that we could not find a sponsor for this vector. So there is no, as you know, there's no community landscape that could, such a vector could be derived from. And so far we don't have, let's say, a sponsor from SAP or from Stackit or wherever that could provide such a vector. We tried it, but we were not successful so far.
Okay, I don't know whether we are tiptoeing now around something, or what do you mean with sponsor?
Okay, so
I mean, we in our company, we do that. So we of course, you can call it an input qualification, however you want to call it, but we
Yes.
know what is the last known good combination of components, and probably
Yes.
you, Tim, from Stackit, you also know it. So we have that information.
We have it, but we don't have anyone that is willing to contribute that information back into the open source project yet. If you want to hear the official statement that can be discussed in this round.
What a pity.
It is indeed a pity. So maybe we can summarize how it works today. It's best effort, no question. So the assumption is the latest version, they fit together. Right? So there's this version vector in the release branch of Landscape Kit, which is regularly updated. Patch versions are auto-merged by Renovate. Minor versions must be merged by the maintainers, by the Gardner maintainers, by the extension maintainers, stuff like this. So it's still best effort, right? So you release your extension, let's say AWS extension, has a new minor release. The pull request is open for landscape setup. The maintainer of it says, oh, there is no noticeable change or any breaking change I'm aware of, or we are aware of. Let's merge it in this release vector, in this version vector. Okay, if something goes south, then it will probably be reverted once this problem is noticed on any landscape. So it could be by us, it could be by any community member. But it's still best effort. That's the point, right? There is no official output qualification happening for this vector as of now. If we can change it somehow, it would be pretty much awesome. And the desired state, I would say. But we are unfortunately not there at the moment.
I mean, it would be pretty complicated to achieve that without a public community maintained landscape, right? So before merging anything into this version vector and the release branch, you would take the new versions that you want to qualify together, deploy it somewhere, run end-to-end tests, and only then merge it. So to be the accepted latest
Yes.
combination of working versions, I guess. And the qualification landscapes that we have in the different companies are probably quite different, not only in infrastructure, but configuration, size, access, whatever. So what a combination that might work for one company might not work for the other. So it will be very hard to recommend a set of versions that work together without this, recommended landscape that is maintained by the community. And I think maintaining this on the best effort is still a big improvement over what we have today, where you still need to go through all of the release notes from all different kind of repositories and figure out if the components work together or not. Having such a vector maintained as best effort still much better. Even if we might discover bugs later on in the combination of versions, that can always happen, I guess.
It can always happen configuration-wise, especially. So even if you had a community landscape and you have to decide for a specific configuration, you cannot cover that, of course. So the recommendation is still, if you want to use this in production, you have to have your own input qualification. Maybe on top of that, there's currently a work stream, let's put it this way, or some thoughts about how we can define a compatibility matrix between Gardener and extension versions, which will on top improve the compatibility among these version vectors. But this is not part of the GEP, of course. So just saying, as a heads up, there is some work going on in this direction, which can in addition improve the situation. But still, it's nothing derived from any landscape. No knowledge about this in the landscape kit.
But Tim, you basically said we will then create a Gardener landscape kit whenever we basically need some adaptations, some new migrations, and so on. And the version vector itself can change independent of that. Now, is a version vector then versioned independently? So I have a Gardener landscape kit release and a version vector release, and I can point to something so that it's also reproducible for me, or is it basically every time I call Gardener landscape kit, I get some version vector, and it might change from one call to the next?
There is no release of the version vector, right? I mean, you are only making the landscape kit releases, and then you are updating this version vector in the repository, which is not under any any release process, right? It's just a file.
It's a file, and there's a subcommand in Landscape Kit that will allow you to download this latest version vector and get the updates. So you can decide to consider this upstream version vector, but you don't have to. Maybe you decide for letting Renovate maintain this version vector or any other tooling. Also, maybe the updates come in via the open component model. Can also be a case, right? So we give that people as an option to go with the upstream versions, but they don't have to.
Okay. So, I mean, companies, the big companies can solve that problem. They do input qualification, they have the version vector, they distribute the version vector, they make sure that the landscapes are at that version vector. So for them, it's not really a problem, but this knowledge that was obtained during these excessive tests, we do not share it with the community. These companies do not share it with the community. I'm just wondering whether it would be possible, even though Tim Ebert, I understand what you said, but I mean, as Garden Landscape Kit is defined, so if you go down to there was a list what is in scope, and of course we test all of that, so we have a pretty good understanding what is working, and this is probably a better informed version vector after we did our input qualification than on best effort, just the latest versions of everything. So we are not sharing as much as we could, and this will result in some frustration. Because sometimes it won't work, and we will even know in advance that it won't work. And that I find a little bit sad. Because we know more.
If we know in advance that it won't work, we will probably not update the version vector, right? If
it's manual, then it goes either way. Either we don't update it, even if we should, or we do not revert, or whatever. So it feels very fragile.
I mean, if you want, we can solve that internally. We can also ask if anyone else from the community, maybe also Stackit, would be willing to contribute. I think, yeah. The situation would be solvable as long as we have landscapes which tests all the components that are in the landscape kit. However, it would be tricky if, for example, Stackit says we test the ACL extension and maybe 2-3 other extensions, and the rest must be covered by SAP, for instance. And then it gets pretty complicated how you can combine the test results.
Yeah, I understand. I have a few ideas, but maybe I should not derail this meeting. So, and this is probably then an internal discussion. So maybe we can have such an internal discussion. But yeah, okay. I think I understand definitely what you were saying.
So we take that just as an internal discussion, or I mean, is there a general interest also from Stackit side, from Tim, Ebert, from your side, to go in the direction to somehow do a joint qualification effort in the community, which also means, I mean, basically you would qualify, we would qualify. Maybe we manage to get that into the budget of NeoNephos Foundation. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we can figure out a way to do this in a joint effort. But I'm highly skeptical that it will work in any company's internal landscapes, right? For obvious reasons, we can't provision any AWS infrastructure, for example, in our landscapes. So we can probably contribute some of the Stackit infrastructure to a joint landscape. for performing qualification there. But otherwise, our options of qualifying the whole setup is very limited.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, therefore I said maybe we do a company internal, or maybe we find some way to share the results of our respective input qualifications.
Maybe some completely new topic then. So about the seeds, if I understood correctly, the seeds are not part of the landscape kit. So this is complete responsibility of in the concrete landscape repo override to define them, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we could create a component which helps you to print out or to generate maybe a seed skeleton. But yeah, the most part probably must be configured by the operator. So they have to decide themselves how to structure the seed objects. So if they have seeds that are pretty similar on the landscapes, then they would, of course, put the most of the values into the base layer and only the things that must be overwritten into the overlays. But yeah, in principle, you're right. It is work that must be done by the operators, by the landscape operators.
Okay, what does it mean with the base layer? So in the landscape repo, I introduce my new component called seeds with a customization structure, right?
Yes.
We have a base, and then let's say I have, I don't know, 100 seeds. What do I do then? 100
Then
overlay directories.
Yeah, if you can't extract it into components again to reduce the repetition, then probably yes. So you can
components or
yes. Yeah. So you can actually only do what let's say customize delivers you as features to solve that problem. The landscape kit will only help you in terms of generating the configuration around it. So you have this custom component and you can use the landscape kit to generate the customization, for instance, right? So that the correct path from the overlay to the base is calculated. So this, let's say the boilerplate will be automatically generated, but the structure and the content must be delivered by the operators.
But that would still be the recommended approach, so that we basically say operators should define seeds and manage their seed with Gardener Landscape Kit, or should they do that in a different way? Because I mean, for example, it's one way if you have 100 seeds. It's a different way potentially if you have just one seed, maybe just the seed in the runtime cluster. Then maybe it's not even necessary to do something. So what's our take there? Is it just kind of something that Gardener Landscape Kit can help with but doesn't have to help with, or should that generally be the solution?
I mean, so the good part about a landscape kit, there is no must at all. So you could do whatever you think is best for your landscape. But if you think about the recommendation, then what do you get with the landscape kit? You get a repository structure or structures, and you get Flux. And so you have the GitOps approach. And then, of course, the recommendation is to use the tooling that is already around it to deploy your custom configuration, like your seeds, your shoots, your custom projects. Yeah. Something that doesn't come out of the box and is highly specific to the landscapes that you deploy. Because if you don't use the very same means, then you have, again, some kind of split brain. And then the question is, does it make sense for you to use the landscape kit at all if you want to set on another tooling. For instance, you don't have a business case for Flux. You want to use Argo CD or any other workflow engine. You can do it. I doubt that it would make sense at this point. But as I said, there's no must.
Solution would be the managed seed set, yes. Funny enough, this week some other users were considering to use it, and they had to stop them last minute because it's not fully implemented. Well, that's also confusing that we still have this API and everything for, I don't know, 5-6 years, but it's not working at all.
I noted it down as a hackathon topic.
Nice. Makes sense.
Yeah,
Maybe
we
what
should finish to implement it.
What we should acknowledge is, and this is the goal of the landscape kit, it is a, let's say, lightweight project around it that tries to glue stuff together in an opinioned way and allows modifications where it makes sense. But it does not help you a lot with on-top automation. So it can do some migration steps, of course. But this is also mentioned in the GEP, it does not abstract anything away. So you're still required to deal with the underlying APIs that are provisioned by Gardener itself. And this is the best example. So if we don't have anything that manages the seed in an intelligent way, then the landscape kit won't help.
So what happens when I disable a component, like let's say an extension, then the landscape kit will no longer produce the respective extension manifest, right?
Yes, yes.
And then Flux is somehow noticing that and cleaning up the deployed resources.
At the moment, you
Right.
have to remove it yourself. So once it's generated, it is not automatically removed from the generated assets. It just stops generating them, right? But to, let's say it as a safety net, you still have to remove it from the repository. And once it is removed, then Flux will go ahead and remove that from the landscape or clean it up.
Mm. Okay.
Another topic was the OCI-based deployment. I think we wanted to come back to that. Yeah, so in our deployment setup, we meanwhile migrated from Flux Git repositories to Flux OCI repositories, meaning we no longer pull the manifests directly from Git, but instead we have still the manifests in Git, and when we commit changes, there is a CI job pushing artifacts to the OCI registry, and then Flux pulls it from there. I think generally this is quite a nice approach and also fits the private cloud deployment story and so on and so forth, because you can just transport the manifests the same way you transport all the other software in OCI artifacts. And yeah, I asked whether this would be in scope or would work with Gardener Landscape Kit, but I think the opinion was that this should both be possible without much hassle, depending on how you want to structure it. Also, OCI repositories definitely have more external dependencies, like you need to set up these CI jobs, right?
Yes, that's, I think, the biggest point. So, so we can use everything that comes with Flux itself, of course. But if anything comes on top, then the question is how a landscape kit can help in that area. So one example is if you say GitHub actions are the de facto standards, then we could print out some GitHub actions for that CI job, for instance, right? But this would not serve all community members. That is at least my thought. So we could do it this way. Would be one approach. I'm also wondering, so we talked about this yesterday, right? There's this artifact abstraction in Flux right now. Maybe it's pretty easy to switch between OCI component commits and GitHub repositories, Git repositories. So we can consider it and look if it's easy to make this to support both by configuration. But still, my impression is if you start with the entire landscape kit story as a new operator or as someone new in Gardener, or maybe with a smaller landscape, then you probably directly go to Git repositories because it's just easier. So you don't
Yes.
have another step in between for publishing the commits to an OCI registry.
Definitely.
So maybe we can consider this as the base requirement, and this OCI approach is then would be the next level of the next level is a requirement. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, so I think starting with Git is obviously the simplest option. However, in my thoughts, it should be pretty simple to exchange the Git repository manifest with an OCI repository manifest. So if you want to use a Gardener Landscape Kit and start with the Git repository and later on decide to publish the manifest in OCI, you set up the job, you switch the manifest, and then this is just another change from the defaults that were generated by the kit. I would assume. And as the overrides or non-default values are handled gracefully by the kit, it should not be a problem. I would assume. Is that correct?
Sounds good. Yes, I would. That's my understanding as well. The only thing we have to check somehow if things don't break if you migrate from Git to OCI, so that you don't end up in a situation where stuff gets cleaned up by Flux during that migration. I'm not sure how your experience is that in that field, but I don't have any experience or by switching between the two approaches. So it's at least something we should consider and need to test before we support it out of the box by the landscape kit, and then people will get into trouble because we support this option.
Our experience was pretty good in that regard. We smoothly migrated from Git repositories to OCI repositories, at least for the Flux customizations part. There's just a drop-in replacement. If you use the Flux Helm controller, it's not always as simple, because if you use a Git repository as a source for a Helm release, you can specify a path to the chart in the Git repository. But with OCI repositories, you can't do that. So you need this indirection with the artifact generator. but then you can achieve the same results. So it's a bit more effort, but still the migration is non-disruptive. So yeah, if you ever want to try that out, I'm happy to help.
Nice, thank you. Makes sense.
So just for understanding, maybe if I want to set up this whole machinery, the steps I would have to do would be to prepare this Git repository somewhere, right? Then have the cluster, of course. Then run the GAK generate and prepare my landscape repo, commit this, and also manually only once this Flux bootstrapping, I guess, because it has to be deployed somehow.
Yes, exactly.
Initially. Yeah. Okay, but from then on, it's plain GitOps, right? I just commit changes to Git and generate maybe new versions with the generate command if needed.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And for secrets, we would probably recommend the SOPs approach in the landscape
Yes.
repo, right?
So SOPs would be the natural fit because it comes out of the box with Flux, and also at least the support. But we don't dictate it in this way. So at the moment, if we notice a secret that is generated by the landscape kit, there will be a comment header saying, watch out, there's sensitive information. We recommend using a SOPs or Vault or any provider or any means that is supported by Flux. But you need to do this or decide for a solution yourself. So this is the current approach.
Yes, in the end, it's the decision of the user, basically.
Yes, yes.
They can also go with unencrypted secrets in Git. Yeah,
well, this could also be an option. The point is, it is really is a very specific to your landscape deployment and the environment you're running in. So we would not go ahead and dictate this somehow.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, we're coming close to the last 10 minutes. Any more
At least
topics
I
to discuss?
don't have any questions anymore for now.
I wanted to comment on the secrets management topic. In our setup, we use external secrets everywhere. We don't use SOPs. Although I also have experience with SOPs and Flux, it also works quite nicely. But yeah, in our case, we use external secrets with Vault, and if you ever want to try it out and make it another recommendation in a landscape kit or whatever, I can also share some experiences here and there. We also managed to deploy external secrets to the virtual garden. So meaning the controller itself runs in the runtime cluster, but you can just create external secrets via Flux in the virtual garden, just as you would do with SOPs. And then you get the secrets there. So it's pretty easy to get secrets everywhere you want from Vault. So that's also a nice solution. But SOPs is easier for getting started, I guess, because you can just use it everywhere where you would apply secrets via Flux. So you just have to set up the encryption once.
That's very good. I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, Luca. At the moment, we are referring to the encryption documentation from Flux, right? To point people for general information. So, and I think the external secrets are part of that documentation as well. So it should be sealed secrets, SOPs, and external secrets, as far as I remember.
Okay, do we have any more things to discuss? Or is everything clarified?
I don't have any more questions or comments. Just
Okay.
wanted to repeat that this is a very well-written proposal, and I think it's easy to understand. I like this, and in general, the proposal, the approach is very good in my opinion, because it doesn't add another abstraction layer, and we have common best practices in the community. So even if you don't use the landscape kit, we will benefit as a community and move together. So I'm very much looking forward to the results.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to hear that.
Okay, so it sounds like, at least from Tim, from your side, we are good to go. Anyone else with regards to decisions? Any objections to this proposal now that we are so close to the end? Or from my side as well, I like the proposal. It's very good. I think we made good progress in the discussions and solved all the open topics. So for me, it's also a go. Peter and Raphael, any other opinions?
No go. I want to go back to Acre YAML. No, of course. C++, oh great. Yeah. No. Finally, something that, as Tim said, without additional complexity and abstractions. I like it also very much. Yes.
I'm just curious if it will really benefit or make it easy to get started with Gardener, because as you said, you still have to deal with all the individual specifics and everything. But yeah, maybe we can make it in a way that at least by default it somehow works if you provide the necessary configuration on top. But yeah, probably for getting started, there's still a lot that needs to be explained.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no perfect solution. I mean,
I think
this
it
was not the goal.
Yeah, maybe it's one puzzle piece of the story, but you're right. It is no. So I often say it's no Windows installer. So you don't click 5 times the next button and you get a completely auto-scaled Gardener solution that you can use until you're reaching 10,000 shoots. So this.
Maybe you can build such an installer based on the toolkit, like some clicky bunty tool that asks you for AWS credentials, and then it puts out the shoot YAML and everything.
Yeah,
I think
the
this will be a good starting point for making the whole story easier. That's for sure.
Yeah.
For the rest, the language models will help.
Yeah, funny. I was thinking just now the same, that you can actually generate targeted installers. So it's not that difficult anymore. Or
Okay.
skills. Actually, skills. When I think about it, what we should provide is a set of skills that would also help people to set it up. That is something that we might do, that also Gardener Landscape Kit can do. I mean, it is more and more popular, and I think it also works. It is remarkably effective, and you should do that. Yes. Anyway, it's a different question, but that skills might actually be a good solution to the problem that it's so hard to configure because there are so many options, and that could actually be a guiding flow. Like when you install OpenClaw. OpenClaw in its boot MD is basically knows basically what it needs to asks all these questions, and is guiding you through the flow and ends up with the configuration. I think maybe if we think in that direction, we could leverage that as a building block. All right. Anyway, different topic.
Okay, perfect.
So I
where-
just have one. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we are in the process of agreeing, so I'm taking 2 amendments for the proposal. One is handling the merge conflicts that we want to make that configurable. And the other one is this OCI approach that you can use instead of the Git repositories.
Yes, and then there is the additional discussion, the internal discussion about the version vector.
Yes.
Okay, with that, thanks everybody for joining and participating in the discussion. And have a good rest of the day. See you
Awesome.
soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Yes.
you very much. See
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.